They found the aliens' medical bay. The only patient was a human. Inside a crashed alien vessel, explorers find a pristine medical bay with a single stasis pod containing a perfectly preserved human from the 21st century. The ship's logs detail a desperate attempt to cure the human of a mysterious ailment. The twist is the ailment they were trying to cure was mortality itself. These aliens were trying to understand and stop death, and saw humans as the universe's most tragically ephemeral species. NEN-THE scanner's crimson light swept across Marcus Chen's face as he crouched beside the twisted metal hull, his breath forming vapor clouds in the bitter Antarctic wind. The alien craft had been buried beneath 3 miles of ice, for what the carbon dating suggested was at least 50,000 years, yet its hull still hummed with residual energy that made his dental fillings ache. Whatever hit this thing hit it hard. Marcus called over the howling wind to his partner, Dr. Elena Vasquez, who was documenting the entry point they'd carved through the vessel's outer shell. The xenoarchaeologist's hands shook as she held her camera, though whether from cold or anticipation, Marcus couldn't tell. "The hull composition is unlike anything in our periodic table," Elena shouted back, her words nearly lost in the gale. "The molecular structure appears to be self-repairing, but something interrupted the process mid-cycle." Marcus activated his headlamp and squeezed through the breach they'd spent 6 hours cutting. The interior of the craft defied every expectation he'd harbored about alien technology during his 20-year career in xenobiology. Instead of sterile corridors or incomprehensible geometries, he found himself in what could only be described as organic architecture, walls that curved like the inside of a massive seashell, surfaces that seemed to breathe with a faint, rhythmic pulse. "Elena, you need to see this," he whispered into his comm unit, his voice carrying an awe that surprised him. NTHE corridors stretched ahead, illuminated by strips of bioluminescent material that flickered to life as they approached, as if the ship itself was awakening. The air inside was surprisingly warm and carried a scent Marcus couldn't identify, something between ozone and vanilla with an underlying sweetness that made his mouth water. Elena emerged through the breach behind him, her equipment bag scraping against the hull. "My God," she breathed, staring at the living architecture surrounding them. "It's like being inside a vast organism." They moved deeper into the vessel, their footsteps muffled by the spongy floor material. The ship seemed to anticipate their movements, lighting their path while leaving the areas behind them in gentle darkness. After what felt like hours of navigation through corridors that branched and merged like blood vessels, they discovered a chamber that stopped them both in their tracks. NTHE Medical Bay was a cathedral of impossible beauty. Curved walls rose 30 feet overhead, their surfaces embedded with thousands of crystalline nodes that pulsed with soft, multicolored light. In the center of the room stood a single stasis pod, its transparent dome revealing a figure that made Marcus's heart skip. Inside lay a human being, NNOT, an alien, not some distant evolutionary cousin, but an unmistakably human form. A woman, appearing to be in her 30s, with dark hair spread across the pod's support structure like spilled ink. Her skin had the pale, almost translucent quality of someone who hadn't seen sunlight in years, yet there was no decay, no sign of age or deterioration. "That's impossible," Elena whispered, approaching the pod with scientific caution warring against personal fascination. "The dating on this ship puts it here long before modern humans evolved." Marcus circled the stasis chamber, noting the alien script that covered every surface around it. The writing seemed to shift and flow when he wasn't looking directly at it, like text swimming underwater. "We need to access their computer systems. There has to be a record of how she got here." And as if responding to his words, one of the wall panels began to glow brighter. Elena approached it cautiously, her xenolinguistics training kicking in as she studied the flowing symbols. "It's activating something," she said. "The patterns are becoming more complex." NTHE chamber, filled with a low harmonic tone, and suddenly the air above them shimmered. A holographic display materialized, showing what appeared to be star charts, biological diagrams, and streams of data in the alien's flowing script. But what caught their attention immediately was a series of images showing the human woman, not as she appeared now, but awake, moving, interacting with tall, ethereal beings, whose forms seemed to shift between solid matter and pure energy. "She was alive when they brought her here," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. Look at the timestamp differences between these recordings. Nelena was already working on her portable translation matrix, feeding the alien symbols into her linguistic analysis software. The computer's trying to establish a pattern match, but this language is unlike anything in our database. It's almost like it exists in multiple dimensions simultaneously. As they worked, the ship around them continued to respond to their presence. Environmental controls activated, bringing the temperature to a more comfortable level. The air filtration system engaged with a sound like gentle breathing. Most remarkably, the holographic displays began cycling through what appeared to be thousands of hours of recorded data. "Marcus," Elena said suddenly, her voice tight with excitement and growing horror. "I'm getting fragments of translation. Look at this sequence." NTHE hologram showed the human woman lying on what appeared to be an examination table surrounded by the energy beings. But rather than appearing distressed or injured, she seemed to be communicating with them, her lips moving in what could have been conversation. "The translation matrix is picking up recurring concepts," Elena continued, her fingers flying over her tablet. "Words that translate roughly to temporal limitation, cellular degradation, and something that keeps appearing that the computer renders as the Great Tragedy." Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the Antarctic cold outside. They weren't experimenting on her, they were trying to help her. NTHE holographic display shifted, showing detailed biological scans of the human woman's cellular structure. The alien annotations were extensive, highlighting areas that Marcus recognized as telomeres, mitochondrial DNA, and other markers of biological aging. But the alien technology was showing these processes in ways human science had never achieved, as if they could visualize time itself acting upon living tissue. "Elena, look at the neural activity scans," Marcus said, pointing to a series of brain images that showed incredible detail. They were monitoring her consciousness, her memories, her dreams. This isn't medical experimentation, it's preservation. They were trying to preserve something. As the hours passed, more of the alien language yielded to Elena's translation algorithms. The story that emerged was unlike anything either scientist had expected. The woman's name was Sarah Mitchell, and according to the ship's logs, she had been a volunteer. "This can't be right," Elena muttered, cross-referencing her translations. According to these records, Sarah Mitchell lived in the early 21st century. She was a neuroscientist who had been diagnosed with a rare genetic disorder that would have killed her within months. But look at this date stamp. The aliens claim they encountered her in what would be our year 2023. Marcus was studying the biological data with growing amazement. These beings weren't just advanced. They existed outside normal temporal flow. Look at how they describe their own biology. They don't age, Elena. They don't die. To them, human mortality isn't just a medical condition. It's a cosmic horror. NNTHE holographic records showed Sarah's interaction with the beings, whom she had apparently named the Eternals. Through fragmented translations, they pieced together conversations that had taken place over what appeared to be years of subjective time, though the temporal mechanics were beyond human comprehension. She taught them about human culture, human emotion, human creativity, Elena translated, her voice growing thick with emotion. And they became obsessed with the idea that a species capable of such beauty and innovation was cursed with such brief lifespans. NTHE Medical Bay's central display activated, showing a timeline that stretched across millennia. The Eternals had apparently devoted centuries to studying the problem of human mortality, collecting data from across time and space. Sarah Mitchell wasn't their first human subject. She was their last, and their most willing participant. They offered her immortality, Marcus realized, reading over Elena's shoulder. But she turned it down. NTHE records showed Sarah's reasoning, translated into concepts that the human mind could barely grasp. She had explained to the Eternals that human creativity, human love, human achievement, all derived their intensity from the knowledge of mortality. To live forever would be to lose the very essence of what made humanity worth preserving. So they chose preservation instead, Elena whispered. They put her in stasis to keep her safe while they continued their research, trying to find a way to extend human life without destroying human nature. NTHE ship's logs revealed the Eternals' growing frustration as centuries passed without a solution. They had mastered the manipulation of time, space, matter, and energy, But they could not solve the puzzle of giving humans longer lives without fundamentally changing what humans were. Every attempt resulted in subjects who lived longer but lost their essential humanity, their passion, their creativity, their capacity for growth and change. Marcus noticed something in the background of the later recordings. The ship itself was changing. What had once appeared to be a pristine research vessel was showing signs of decay, of systems beginning to fail. The Eternals were dying, he realized. Not from age, but from something else. Nelena found the answer buried in the ship's final logs. The Eternals had encountered a cosmic phenomenon they couldn't understand or control, a wave of entropy that was sweeping across their region of space, unmaking everything in its path. Their immortality meant nothing against a force that attacked the very foundations of reality. They were fleeing, Elena translated, her voice heavy with the weight of the story. They brought Sarah here, to Earth, hoping to find other humans who might be able to help them understand mortality as a defense against entropy. But they never made it to populated areas. NTHE ship's crash had been caused not by mechanical failure, but by the Eternals' own biology finally succumbing to the entropy wave. As beings who existed outside normal time, they had been particularly vulnerable to a force that attacked temporal stability itself. "Look at the final entry," Marcus said, pointing to the last coherent record in the ship's database. NTHE translation was fragmentary, but its meaning was clear. The Eternals had realized that mortality wasn't humanity's curse, it was humanity's greatest strength. By existing within the flow of time, by accepting change and loss as fundamental parts of existence, humans were naturally resistant to the entropy that had destroyed entire immortal civilizations. "They were wrong about everything," Elena said softly. "They thought they were trying to save us from death, but death was what would have saved them." NTHE's stasis pod containing Sarah Mitchell hummed softly, its system still functioning after millennia of operation. The woman inside appeared peaceful, suspended in a moment between life and death, unaware that the beings who had tried to rescue her from mortality had themselves fallen victim to their own immortality. "And we could wake her," Marcus suggested, studying the pod's control systems. "The technology appears to be stable," Nelena shook her head slowly. "Read the final protocols they established. She can't be awakened unless they found a solution to the entropy problem. Her nervous system is too integrated with the ship's temporal stabilizers. Waking her now would cause her consciousness to scatter across multiple time streams." They stood in silence, contemplating the tragic irony of the situation. The most advanced beings in the galaxy had been destroyed by their inability to accept the one thing that defined human existence, the fact that all things must end. "There's something else," Elena said, her voice barely audible. "Look at the ship's destination records." Marcus followed her gaze to a star chart that showed the Eternals' intended course. They hadn't been fleeing randomly. They had been heading specifically toward Earth's solar system, toward the planet where humanity was just beginning to develop space technology. They were coming to warn us, he realized, about the entropy wave. Nelena's translation matrix chimed with a new interpretation of the ship's final messages. The entropy phenomenon wasn't just destroying the Eternals' region of space, it was expanding, moving through the galaxy at a rate that would bring it to Earth's vicinity in approximately 50,000 years. "Which means," Marcus said slowly, "it should be arriving right about now." As if summoned by his words, the ship's warning systems activated for the first time in millennia. The chamber filled with harmonics that spoke of danger on a cosmic scale, of something vast and hungry approaching from the depths of space. Nelena grabbed Marcus's arm. "We need to document everything and get this information to the scientific community. If the Eternals were right about the entropy wave, humanity needs to prepare." As they worked frantically to copy the ship's databases, Marcus found himself drawn back to Sarah Mitchell's peaceful face behind the transparent dome. She had been willing to sacrifice her own extended life to help beings she barely understood solve a problem that threatened entire civilizations. Even in stasis, she represented everything the Eternals had found both beautiful and tragic about humanity. "Nelena," he said quietly, "what if we're looking at this wrong?" NSHE paused in her data collection. "What do you mean?" "The Eternals spent centuries trying to give humans immortality so we could survive the entropy wave. But what if the answer isn't surviving it? What if the answer is accepting it?" Nelena stared at him, then back at the sleeping woman. "You're suggesting that mortality itself is a form of protection? Think about it. Every immortal species the Eternals encountered was destroyed by the entropy wave. But humans, with our brief lifespans, our constant change and adaptation, we might be the only species capable of riding the wave instead of being destroyed by it. NTHE ship's systems pulsed around them, as if responding to their conversation. The holographic displays shifted, showing not the Eternals' research into extending human life, but their documentation of human resilience, human adaptability, human capacity for growth in the face of impossible challenges. Sarah Mitchell understood something they didn't, Marcus continued. She knew that trying to escape death was the wrong approach. The right approach is to make peace with it, to live fully within its boundaries. Nelena was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications. If you're right, then this ship isn't just a tomb or a laboratory. It's a message telling us that we're already equipped to survive what's coming. We just need to trust in what makes us human. NTHE ship's deep memory banks activated automatically, triggered by their discussion. New holographic displays materialized, showing the Eternals' final experiments, not with human biology, but with human culture. They had studied art, music, literature, philosophy, trying to understand how beings with such limited lifespans could produce works of such profound beauty and meaning. "Look at this," Elena whispered, as the displays showed the Eternals' attempts to create their own art. The results were technically perfect but emotionally hollow, magnificent structures that lacked soul, complex compositions that failed to move the listener, poetry that demonstrated perfect understanding of language but no comprehension of the human heart. NN. They could replicate the forms but not the essence, Marcus observed, because the essence comes from knowing that everything is temporary. NTHE's ship revealed more of its secrets as they continued to explore. Hidden chambers contained the Eternals' collection of human artifacts, photographs, paintings, musical instruments, books, all carefully preserved and endlessly studied. The beings had been trying to decode the secret of human creativity, not realizing that the secret lay not in the artifacts themselves, but in the circumstances of their creation. They were immortal beings trying to understand mortal art, Elena said, her voice filled with wonder and sadness. It must have been like trying to understand color while being blind, and as they delved deeper into the ship's records, they discovered that the Eternals' research had taken an unexpected turn in their final years. Instead of trying to cure human mortality, they had begun trying to inflict it upon themselves. The experiments were crude and ultimately unsuccessful. Beings evolved for immortality couldn't simply choose to die. They realized too late that mortality isn't a disease to be cured, Marcus said, studying the failed experiments. It's an integral part of what makes a species capable of growth and change. The ship's warning systems grew more insistent, their harmonics shifting to frequencies that made both humans feel vaguely nauseous. Through the transparent walls of the medical bay, they could see displays showing real-time data from space-based sensors. Something was indeed approaching the solar system, a distortion in space-time that defied easy description. The entropy wave, Elena breathed, watching the displays track its progress. It's not just destroying matter and energy. It's unmaking the fundamental structures that allow reality to exist. Marcus was studying the ship's projections of the wave's effects. But look at how it interacts with different types of matter and energy. Stable, unchanging structures are completely dissolved. But things that are already in flux, already changing, they pass through, Elena finished, her eyes widening with understanding. The entropy wave doesn't destroy change. It destroys stasis. NTHE implications hit them simultaneously. Every immortal civilization in the galaxy had been vulnerable to the entropy wave because immortality was, by definition, a form of stasis. The Eternals, despite their advanced technology, had made themselves into unchanging beings, perfect, eternal, and therefore perfectly vulnerable to a force that unmade permanence itself. Humans are protected not despite our mortality, but because of it, Marcus said, his voice filled with awe. We're already creatures of change, already adapted to loss and renewal. The entropy wave won't destroy us. It might actually accelerate our evolution. NTHE ship's medical systems activated again, running new scans on Sarah Mitchell's stasis pod. The readings were extraordinary. Her biological processes were in constant flux, her neural patterns shifting and changing even in deep sleep. The Eternal's stasis technology hadn't frozen her in time. It had created a state of controlled change, allowing her consciousness to adapt and evolve while her body remained preserved. She's not sleeping, Elena realized, studying the neural activity patterns. She's dreaming. And her dreams are changing her, preparing her for something. NTHE stasis pods displays showed decades of dream activity, recorded and analyzed by the ship's systems. Sarah Mitchell had been experiencing accelerated psychological evolution, her mind adapting to concepts and realities that no human had ever encountered. The Eternals had unknowingly created the perfect bridge between mortal and immortal consciousness. They succeeded, after all, Marcus said softly. Not by making her immortal, but by making her into something new, something that could survive both mortality and immortality. NTHE ship's systems began a new sequence, one that hadn't been activated since the Eternals' final days. The medical bay transformed around them, walls becoming transparent to reveal the vast complexity of the ship's interior. They were witnessing the vessel's final gift, a complete record of the Eternals' civilization, their knowledge, their art, their science, all preserved for whoever might find them. "They're giving us everything," Elena whispered, as terabytes of data flowed through the ship's systems. Their entire cultural legacy freely shared. NBUT, the true gift, became clear as the ship's temporal systems engaged. The entropy wave wasn't just approaching, it was already here, washing over the solar system in ways that human instruments couldn't detect. The wave moved through normal spacetime like water through a sieve, affecting only structures that existed in temporal stasis. "We're already inside it," Marcus realized, watching the displays show the wave's progress through Earth's immediate vicinity. "It's been passing through our solar system for hours, maybe days." Nelena checked her readings. "But we're not being affected because we're not temporally static. Our biological processes, our consciousness, even our planet's orbit, everything is in constant motion, constant change." NTHE ship around them began to resonate with new harmonics as the entropy wave passed through its hull. The Eternals' technology, designed for permanence and stasis, began to break down at the quantum level. But Sarah Mitchell's stasis pod remained stable, its constantly changing parameters protecting it from the wave's effects. "The ship is dying," Marcus said, watching systems fail throughout the vessel. "But she's going to survive." Nelena was working frantically at the control panels, trying to initiate the pod's awakening sequence. "If we're right about human adaptation to the entropy wave, she might be the key to understanding how our species can not just survive, but thrive in a universe where permanence is impossible." The awakening process began slowly, the pod's biosystems gradually returning Sarah Mitchell to full consciousness. Her eyes opened for the first time in 50,000 years, focusing with surprising clarity on the two humans standing beside her pod. "The wave," she said, her voice rough from disuse but her mind immediately alert. "I can feel it. It's here, isn't it?" Marcus and Elena exchanged amazed glances. "You knew it was coming?" Sarah sat up slowly, her body responding to movement despite millennia of stasis. "I've been dreaming about it. The Eternals' technology didn't just preserve my body. It connected me to their predictive systems. I've been experiencing visions of possible futures for thousands of years." As the ship continued to deteriorate around them, Sarah shared what she had learned during her prolonged sleep. The entropy wave wasn't destructive, it was transformative. Civilizations that tried to resist it by creating permanent structures were unmade, but those that embraced change were elevated to new forms of existence. "Human mortality isn't a flaw to be corrected," she explained, her words coming faster as more of her memories returned. "It's an evolutionary advantage. Every generation of humans is different from the last, adapting and changing in response to new challenges. The entropy wave recognizes this pattern and amplifies it." Nelena helped Sarah stand as the medical bay's systems failed around them. "What happens to us now? To humanity?" Sarah smiled, and for a moment her expression held the wisdom of millennia combined with the wonder of a child seeing the world for the first time. "We become what we were always meant to be, agents of change in a universe that's finally ready to evolve." NTHE ship gave one final gift as its systems shut down permanently. The accumulated knowledge of the Eternals, their science, their philosophy, their understanding of the cosmos, downloaded directly into Sarah's enhanced neural pathways. She became a living repository of immortal knowledge combined with mortal wisdom. "We need to get back to the surface," Marcus said, as the ship's hull began to show microscopic cracks from the entropy wave's passage. "The world needs to know what we've discovered." As they made their way through the dying ship's corridors, Sarah explained more of what she had learned. Humanity was on the verge of a species-wide evolution, triggered by the entropy wave's passage through Earth's biosphere. The changes wouldn't be physical. They would be psychological, spiritual, opening new forms of consciousness that had been impossible under the old universal constants. "The Eternals were right about one thing," Sarah said as they reached the breach in the ship's hull. "Mortality and immortality don't have to be opposites. They can be complementary aspects of a greater form of existence." Nelena sealed the breach behind them as they prepared to leave the ship forever. "What about you? The stasis technology is failing. Are you going to age normally now?" Sarah considered the question as they began their ascent through the ice. "I don't think normal aging applies anymore. The entropy wave has changed the fundamental rules. I'm not immortal in the way the Eternals were, but I'm not entirely mortal either. I'm something new." NTHE journey to the surface took on the quality of a pilgrimage. They were carrying more than scientific data. They were carrying the keys to humanity's next evolutionary step. The entropy wave continued to pass through Earth's atmosphere, undetectable to most instruments, but profoundly affecting the planet's temporal structure. "People are going to change," Sarah warned as they finally saw sunlight filtering through the ice above. "Some will adapt easily, but others will resist. The transition won't be smooth." Marcus was already planning the papers he would write, the conferences he would address. "How do we help humanity prepare for something they can't understand?" "By teaching them what the Eternals never learned," Sarah replied. "That change isn't something to be feared or resisted. It's something to be embraced." They emerged from the ice into an Antarctic dawn that seemed somehow different from the one they had left behind. The quality of light, the feel of the air, even the sound of the wind. Everything carried subtle alterations that spoke of fundamental changes in the nature of reality itself. "Can you feel it?" Elena asked, looking around at the transformed landscape. "It's like the whole world is holding its breath." Sarah nodded, her enhanced senses detecting changes that were invisible to unmodified human perception. "The wave is still passing through. It'll take months to complete its journey through Earth's biosphere. By the time it's finished, every living thing on the planet will have been touched by it." As they made their way back to their base camp, Sarah began to experience flashes of prescient insight, glimpses of possible futures spreading out before humanity like branches on an infinite tree. In some timelines, the species adapted quickly and smoothly, integrating the lessons of the Eternals with human wisdom to create a new form of civilization. In others, fear and resistance led to conflict and chaos as different groups interpreted the changes in contradictory ways. "The future isn't fixed," she told Marcus and Elena. "The entropy wave has made possibility itself more fluid. What happens to humanity depends on the choices we make in the next few years." Their base camp equipment was still functioning, but the readings from their instruments showed anomalies that hadn't been there when they left. Temporal fluctuations, quantum irregularities, signs that the fabric of spacetime itself was becoming more malleable in the wave's wake. "We need to contact the outside world," Elena said, setting up their communication array. "But how do we explain what we've found? How do we tell people that the fundamental nature of reality is changing?" And Sarah was studying the instrument readings with growing fascination. "Maybe we don't tell them. Maybe we show them. The changes are already beginning. People around the world are going to start experiencing things they can't explain. Dreams that feel more real than waking life. Moments of intuition that prove to be literally prophetic. A growing sense that the boundaries between past, present, and future are becoming more fluid." If to demonstrate her point, their radio crackled to life with confused reports from research stations around the globe. Teams in Greenland were reporting aurora-like phenomena in clear skies. Scientists in the Sahara were detecting electromagnetic anomalies that their equipment couldn't classify. Astronomers worldwide were seeing distortions in deep space that seemed to follow patterns rather than random distribution. "It's happening everywhere," Marcus realized, listening to the reports. "The entropy wave isn't just passing through Earth, it's integrating with it." Sarah closed her eyes, accessing the vast knowledge the Eternals had given her. According to their projections, The integration process will take approximately 18 months. During that time, humans will gradually develop new sensory capabilities, enhanced pattern recognition, and, most importantly, a natural resistance to temporal paradox. Nelena looked up from her notes. Resistance to temporal paradox. The ability to exist coherently across multiple timelines simultaneously, Sarah explained. It's how the Eternals initially achieved immortality, before they made the mistake of trying to lock themselves into a single temporal state. Humans will develop this ability naturally, but will retain our capacity for change and growth. NTHE implications were staggering. Humanity was evolving into something that combined the best aspects of mortal and immortal existence. The creativity and adaptability of mortal beings with the expanded consciousness and temporal awareness of immortal ones. "We're going to become time travelers," Marcus said. His voice filled with wonder. "Not travelers," Sarah corrected. "Time natives. Beings who exist naturally across multiple temporal states without losing our essential humanity." As they prepared to leave Antarctica with their revolutionary discovery, Sarah experienced one final vision, a glimpse of humanity's far future. She saw cities that existed across multiple timelines simultaneously, art forms that incorporated temporal dimensions as naturally as they used color and sound, and humans who lived full creative lives across spans of time that would have been incomprehensible to their ancestors. The Eternals' gift wasn't just their knowledge, she realized. It was their mistake. By showing us what immortality without change looked like, they taught us how to achieve immortality through change. NTHE Journey Home took on the quality of a transition between worlds. With each mile they traveled away from the buried ship, the old universe seemed to fade a little more, replaced by something richer, more complex, more alive with possibility. We publish our findings," Elena said. "We're going to change everything. Science, philosophy, religion, nothing will be the same." Sarah smiled, her expression holding the warmth of human compassion enhanced by the wisdom of ages. "That's exactly what the universe needs. The entropy wave isn't destroying the old reality, it's making room for a new one. And we get to help build it." And as their plane lifted off from the Antarctic Research Station, carrying them back to a world that was already beginning to transform, Sarah Mitchell looked down at the ice that had been her home for 50,000 years. Somewhere far beneath the frozen surface, the alien ship was completing its final shutdown, its mission accomplished at last. NTHE Eternals had sought to cure humanity's mortality, and instead had given them something far more precious. The knowledge that mortality and immortality were not opposing forces but complementary aspects of a greater wholeness. Death was not the enemy of life, but its partner in the dance of existence. Behind them, the Antarctic landscape stretched endlessly toward the horizon, unmarked by any sign of the cosmic drama that had played out beneath its surface. But the effects of that drama were spreading outward like ripples in a pond, touching every human life on Earth as the entropy wave continued its gentle transformation of reality itself. Sarah closed her eyes and reached out with her enhanced consciousness, feeling the pulse of change as it swept across the planet. 7 billion human beings were about to discover that they were more than they had ever imagined possible. The age of pure mortality was ending, but the age of pure immortality would never begin. Instead, humanity was entering something entirely new, an age of conscious evolution, where death and life, time and eternity, change and permanence would dance together in perfect harmony. The Eternals' greatest failure had become humanity's greatest gift, and the universe itself was richer for it. And as the plane disappeared into the Arctic sky, the frozen continent settled back into its ancient silence. But beneath the ice, in the depths of the alien ship, one final system activated. A beacon that would call out across the galaxy, announcing to any surviving immortal civilizations that the secret they had sought for millennia had finally been found. NTHE's secret was not the conquest of death, but the embrace of change. And in a universe where entropy was king, change was the only true form of immortality.